السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
الحمد لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه ما بعد. So, inshallah, we are going to continue our discussion of the last 10 surahs with Surah Al-Kauther. We didn't have Tafseer last week because it was Community Potluck Friday, and inshallah on the Friday nights that there is a community potluck, we will be discussing other topics, and the other Fridays inshallah we will be doing our Tafseer. So the last session of our Tafseer was discussion of Surah Ma'un, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically talks about two groups of people, but as mentioned, it is not important of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually talks about, but rather the attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them as having, simply because every single person is capable of having any attribute. And if a person, even though they are a believer, finds within themselves detestable attributes, then it is their responsibility to make sure that it is minimized to the best of their ability. However, within that surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the mushrikeen of Mecca based on some of the historical narrations we find, and based on the attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in the second half of the surah. He is talking about the hypocrites, the munafiqeen that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum had encountered in Medina after migration. So, some of the attributes, if you want to summarize them, is essentially Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about not being miserly, not being stingy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning the fact of not being neglectful of salah, of not showing off when praying salah, and at the same time to not hold back any act of good. So the connection between Surah Kauthar and Surah Ma'un is Surah Ma'un lists 4 particular attributes that a person is supposed to the best of their abilities, minimize within themselves. Surah Kauthar talks about attributes that a believer is supposed to cultivate within themselves, right? So in other words, Surah Ma'un gives 4 qualities, and the 4 counter qualities are mentioned in Surah Kauthar. Surah Kauther is one of the shortest surahs of the Quran, even by word count. There are 2 other surahs that have 3 verses. Surah Asr is also 3 verses. Surah Ahad, Surah Ikhlas is also 3 verses. But in terms of word count, Surah Kauther, even though it is 3 verses, it is shorter than the other 2. Surah Kauther is named as such because of the word Inna a'ataynaka al-Kauther mentioned in the first verse of the surah. It is a Makki surah. In other words, it is a surah that was revealed in Makkah to the Prophet ﷺ before the migration, and this is according to majority of the scholars. The connection between Surah Ma'un and Surah Kauther, as I mentioned, is the fact that Surah Ma'un talks about certain attributes that a believer is not supposed to have, and how to counteract any of those attributes that are found within an individual. A person will find the antidote to that in Surah Kauther. The particular story behind the revelation of Surah Al-Kauther is that one of the most well-known enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, by the name of As bin Wa'il, remarked when the Prophet ﷺ's infant son, either Qasim or Ibrahim, passed away. So As bin Wa'il, as was customary at that time, not only remarked because it was Not only because of what he thought would happen, but also because he wanted to cause maximum pain to the Prophet ﷺ. So As bin Wa'il, when he heard that the Prophet ﷺ's infant son had passed away, made the comment, Batara Muhammad, right? Batara Muhammad. The word Batara means to be cut off. It literally means to be cut off, but what it's implying is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ's legacy has been cut off because he has no male children, right? He has no male progeny, he has no one to carry forward his name. And if you think about it, this is how not only the tribes and the cultures of those times thought, but even today. In many parts of the world, and even in Muslim majority countries, in our communities, there is absolutely a bias for male children over female children, right? Sometimes it's because of a cultural preference that the son can do more for the father as they grow older versus the daughter who is going to get married and be out of the household. A lot of that is because of our own cultural baggage. We have to understand that when it comes to the deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places equal value in raising good children, whether they are a son or a daughter, and they have the capacity to be of sources of sadaqah for their parents, whether they are a son or a daughter. It doesn't matter what gender they are. Of course, that's a whole separate topic, but the fact is that As bin Wa'il, aside from the fact that he made a very culturally insensitive remark, right, which is making a remark when somebody's male child had just passed away that, oh, nobody will remember you, but also said it because he was an enemy of the Prophet ﷺ and wanted to cause more pain to the Prophet ﷺ. So this surah was revealed at that time to the Prophet ﷺ as not only a source of comfort, but also as a reminder to the Prophet of the immense good that Allah had given to him, even though his male child had just passed away, even though his son had just passed away. So the surah itself begins by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam of what had been given to him. And in the context of today's khutbah, I mentioned that a lot of times we are ungrateful because we don't have the perspective of what Allah has already given to us. When a person has perspective, when a person recognizes the blessings that Allah had already given them, it will be easier for them to be grateful even when things seem to be very, very difficult. Now, it's not to say that the Prophet ﷺ forgot, na'udhu billah, the blessings that Allah had given him, but rather even as a reminder for the Prophet, it is a lesson for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. It's not to say that Allah was chastising the Prophet for being sad, for grieving like any parent would, na'udhu billah, but also to keep in perspective what Allah had already given him alongside that as well. Inna a'tainaka al-Kauther. Indeed, we have given you, O Prophet, and of course this is being addressed to the Prophet ﷺ directly, al-Kauther. The word Kauther literally means khayrun kathirun, means an immense amount of good, an abundant good. Some Mufassirin say that it refers specifically to the fountain of Kauther that the Prophet ﷺ will be gifted on the Day of Judgment, and from which the Prophet ﷺ will give water to all the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from among those who are able to drink from the water of Kauther, from the blessed hands of the Prophet ﷺ. Some Mufassirin say that the word Kauther has a more general application, which is the Prophet ﷺ being not only a prophet, but the last prophet, which is a great honor, also being given the Quran, a revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and essentially being the person that he is, everything combined, can fall under the word Kauther. Either way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that even though your child has just passed away and we have taken away your child, we have still given you an immense amount of good. Therefore, your response to all of the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you should be two things in particular that is mentioned in verse number 2. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. Therefore, in other words, as a response to all the blessings that Allah has given you, what should you do, right? So Allah is reminding you of the fact that you have been given an immense amount of good. What should you do in return? I mentioned in the khutbah today that some scholars say that there is a very close and very strong correlation between praise of Allah and Iman, right? There is a very strong correlation between praise of Allah and Iman, because what connects the two is shukr. When a person is thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they do so because they recognize the blessings of Allah, right? So, when you recognize the blessings of Allah and you are thankful, you are praising Allah for all the blessings. And in return, the only way we can express our gratefulness is by believing in Allah, is by having Iman and following the commandments of Allah. That is the only possible way that we as human beings can express our gratitude and appreciation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, in Inna a'tainaka al-Kauther, Allah is reminding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam of the immense amount of good that had been given to him, that had been gifted to him. What should be some ways that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can express his appreciation? And of course, this isn't only for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also a general lesson for the ummah as well. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. Number one, pray to your Lord. Pray to your Lord. Of course, referring specifically to salah. And wanhar. Wanhar literally means to sacrifice a camel. The word nahar refers specifically to how you slaughter a camel because of its neck. You pierce its neck where all of the veins are first before you slaughter it, and that particular act is referred as nahar. And makes sense because a camel was not only one of the most common animals at that time, but it was also a very prized possession, right? So we can say that when a person is sacrificing, they should try to sacrifice the best quality that is available to them, right? So wanhar, and sacrifice, of course, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, if you think about the qualities that were mentioned in Surah Ma'un, 3 of the 4, if you think about it, 3 of the 4 are kind of responded to within the first 2 verses. So one of the detestable qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned in Surah Ma'un is the quality of being stingy, of being miserly, right? وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. These individuals do not feed the poor themselves because of how stingy they are, but they do not encourage others to feed the poor, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as someone who had been given Kauther, that you have been given an immense amount of good, and therefore it should be shared with other individuals as well. In other words, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted you something good and you are able to benefit others, then you should benefit others. In Surah Ma'un, one of the qualities that Allah mentioned was about praying to show other people, right? فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ, those who pray to show others, right? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ, pray to Allah, it also implies pray only for Allah and not for others, right? That your act of worship shouldn't be to show others, but rather it should be exclusively for Allah in every one of its aspects. So do not be like the hypocrites who pray only so that they can show other people that they are devoted Muslims, right? They pray not to Allah, but rather to show other people. And also, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ, to stay on the salah, right? To stay on the salah, to always use salah as a way to grow closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is the best way to express our appreciation to Allah after our belief in Him, right? Salah is the greatest act of worship because in every part of it we are submitting and expressing our devotion to Allah. It is the greatest act of worship, bar none. So, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ, at this very critical moment where Allah is comforting the Prophet ﷺ, the first action that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet ﷺ to continue is فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ, pray to Allah. Meaning, no matter what the situation, what the circumstance is in a person's life, they should always pray to Allah. Contrasted with what Allah had mentioned in Surah Ma'un as the hypocrites who عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ, who are neglectful of their salah. That in public, that they are in the first saf, so that they can show others, but in their homes, they delay prayer or they do not pray at all because there is nobody to see them, right? So they are neglectful of their prayer. So the Prophet ﷺ is being reminded to not only pray to Allah, but to be consistent with salah and not be neglectful of it. Not that the Prophet ﷺ was, but again, it is also a lesson for any person who follows the example of the Prophet ﷺ. The last attribute, وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ, that they do not encourage the feeding of the poor, right? They do not encourage the feeding of the poor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding the Prophet ﷺ to sacrifice, right? To sacrifice an animal. And of course, when you sacrifice an animal, the purpose of it is not to keep everything for yourself, but to feed others, to distribute the poor, to distribute the meat to those who are needy. So the Prophet ﷺ is being encouraged to sacrifice, and of course, in that way, feed the people who are in need. And the last quality is again a counter to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions at the end of Surah Ma'un, وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ, that these individuals are so miserly that they hold back even the smallest acts of good. And if you think about it, the word Ma'un and Kauthar are exact opposites. The word Kauthar is an immense amount of good, and Ma'un is a very small act of kindness, a very small act of good. And the examples that you find in the books of Tafseer is, for example, giving somebody a cup of salt, a cup of milk, some water, etc. Things that you wouldn't ask for, back in return. So the Prophet ﷺ is being contrasted with that, and is being told by Allah that you have been given so much good that it should be shared with the people around you. Inna a'tainaka al-Kauther, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, O Prophet, an immense amount of good, and in return, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ, you should pray to Allah and sincerely, with devotion, without being neglectful of your salah. وَانْحَرْ, you should sacrifice, and of course when you sacrifice, you don't only keep it for yourself, but you give it to those who are deserving of it. If you think about it, some of the things that we do in our Eids are designed to make sure that everybody within the community is participating in the 2 days of happiness, right? So for example, when it comes to Eid al-Fitr, we usually give Sadaqatul Fitr, right? We usually give Sadaqatul Fitr. The best way to give Sadaqatul Fitr, or even the best time to give Sadaqatul Fitr, is at least a few days before Eid, so that you are giving enough time for that Sadaqatul Fitr to reach the people who are in need, and so that they could buy food, clothing, and small things to participate in the general happiness of the community, right? If you give Sadaqatul Fitr right before Salah, the responsibility is gone from you. However, you have not, allowed yourself to benefit, or your sadaqatul fitr to benefit as it would have if you had done so earlier, right? When it comes to Eid al-Adha, the purpose of sacrificing is not only so that you can have meat in your freezer for about 4 months, 6 months, right? It's not only to exchange meats with family members who also give you a packet of meat, so you're left with the same amount essentially, right? But it is so that not only are you feeding yourself, but so that you are feeding others as well. So whatever, in our communities we have a chance to give and share with the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, then a person should absolutely do so. Now, this surah was of course revealed in response to the statement of As bin Wa'il, Batara Muhammad, right? That Muhammad has been cut off because he has no more male children, nobody to carry on his name and legacy, right? And aside from the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was distraught because his child passed away, as a prophet, the Prophet ﷺ was concerned that after he passed away, that the word of Allah would disappear, right? However, this surah is also a confirmation to the Prophet ﷺ, in addition to being a consolation, that your mission will not die with you. Your mission will not die with you, right? That people will remember the message, right? That you don't have to worry about how many followers that you have. You don't have to worry about who's listening to you or who is not listening to you. Your message will be remembered. And this is a great lesson for every single one of us who are trying to leave behind a good legacy, in our families, in our communities, in our societies, right? Because at the end of the day, the message is the word of Allah, right? And the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He is the protector of the revelation, right? Our job is to make sure that it's passed on. Our job is to make sure that it is forwarded, right? So a lot of times we get caught up in numbers and details and whether or not something is impactful or being, beneficial based solely on numbers and the facts and what we can see. However, anything can have a long-lasting effect if the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. So Allah ends Surah Al-Kauther by mentioning almost as a side note, right? By the way, this is kind of a by the way statement. Inna shani'aka huwa al-Aqsa. By the way, the one who detests you, right? To the one who hates you. And again, notice that Allah doesn't call out As bin Wa'il by name. He doesn't call out As bin Wa'il by name, but He says the one who detests you. And this applies to any person who detests the Prophet ﷺ in any point in history, right? Definitely the people at the time of the Prophet, but also every single person who has any iota, who has even an iota of hatred for the Prophet ﷺ in their hearts until the Day of Judgment. This applies to them. Inna shani'aka huwa al-Aqsa. As to the one who detests you, they are the one who are cut off from all good. Of course, if a person doesn't make tawbah, then at the end of the day, on the Day of Judgment, they will be answerable to Allah. So Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ that do not let the words of As bin Wa'il distract you or make you feel overly concerned for your legacy. Because the person who is saying that you are cut off from all good, they are the one who will be cut off. And today, 1400 plus years later, nobody says that I am the descendant of As bin Wa'il. Right? We don't know who his descendants are. Yet we know who the descendants of the Prophet ﷺ are. Anytime we say the word Muhammad, we say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Any person, whether they like Islam, hate Islam, follow Islam, doesn't practice, whatever it is, they know who the Prophet ﷺ is, right? Any person who rationally analyzes the achievements of the Prophet ﷺ in his very short amount of time that he was a prophet, right? 23 plus years, right? Just about. Any person who rationally analyzes the Prophet ﷺ's mission will absolutely come to the conclusion, as many have had already, even though they were non-Muslims, that the Prophet was successful in what he wanted to accomplish. And that he did what perhaps no other person in human history ever did or ever can do. And this is before technology. This is before the era of mass communication, right? And the remarkable life of the Prophet's mission. Again, this isn't the Prophet's doing, this is Allah, right? Allah said, "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidun," that we are the ones that will preserve the religion, right? We are the ones that revealed it, and we are the ones that will preserve it, right? So the Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, who taught the Tabi'een radiallahu anhum, who taught the Tabi'een, so on and so on, and it has carried on ever since, right? Yes, Allah is the one who used the Prophet ﷺ as a vehicle in order to spread the message in this world, but at the end of the day, any movement, right? Any movement that is based on a figure, right? And this is, of course, a large discussion when it comes to the longevity of any institution, party, movement, ideology, right? It's based on who starts it, how do they ensure that the message has moved on, whether it's founded on principles or ideas or a personality, right? Either way, there are so many movements and ideologies that have come and gone and are essentially preserved in the books of history, right? However, the Prophet ﷺ's teachings and the mere fact that his name is known to most, if not all, of the population of the world is a testament of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, right? That the one who detests you is the one who is cut off from all good, not only in this world, but in the hereafter as well. Not only in this world, but in the hereafter as well. Of course, if they don't make tawbah before that. But the Prophet ﷺ is somebody whose remarkable achievements is something that any rational person will admire, right? If they just study the seerah. Because it is something worth admiring. But for us Muslims, we don't admire it because of its longevity, because of the fact that it survived so long, but because of who the Prophet ﷺ was, and the efforts and collective efforts of successive generations, right? So, at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends Surah Al-Kauther by mentioning the opposite word of Kauthar, which is Abtar, right? So Kauthar is immense amount of good, and Abtar, somebody who had been cut off from all good, right? So As bin Wa'il, who thought himself as somebody whose legacy was secure, thought himself as Kauthar, right? And the Prophet as Abtar. But it was flipped by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah said that you are Kauthar. You have been given so much good, and the one who detests you, the one who hates you, is the one who is abtar in reality. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and protect us, and give us knowledge that benefits us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to cultivate the attributes that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was commanded to do so in the surah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to minimize any detestable attribute that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide, bless and protect us all. Allahu a'lam wa billahi tawfiq. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.